Welcome to Fierce Compassion Podcast. My name is Brett William Simpson and I'm your host. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you're second on your own priority list and you're seeking a little bit of self-compassion and self-love, if you're looking to build resilience emotionally, mentally, physically, and even spiritually, then this is the podcast for you. I'm a spontaneous remission cancer survivor, and over the past 13 years, I've learned why some people pass from cancer and while others with the same diagnosis, with the same prognosis, end up living these amazing and fulfilling lives. So I tend to use very big words now: psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, neuroplasticity, to sound very clever, but more so to really explain and demystify the magic, or actually the science, of what really feeds our health and what starves disease. So Fierce Compassion Podcast shows up people who have wisdom in compassion, in healing, and in being fully human. So if you're willing and capable of taking responsibility for your healing and life, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Fierce Compassion Podcast. Today I'm interviewing Alex Marostica. She's a coach, she's a digital creator, and she's a motivational speaker. Alex helps ordinary people live extraordinary lives of freedom, meaning, and happiness. She cut her teeth in human resources at one of the most prestigious hotel groups in Cape Town, known as the 12 Apostles Hotel and Spa. But the reason I'm interviewing Alex today is that after her marriage ended, she had the courage to reinvent herself almost completely. She's the founder of Flying Phoenix, which is a brand that she created that helps people transition their lives to a state of holistic health and joyfulness. She's also the founder and partner in Ignite Your Business, that supports coaches, healers, and personal development practitioners to make an impact using digital education. So I've known Alex for 6 years, and she's one of those sorts of people that is basically a lighthouse of courage, of creative persistence, and of generosity. She has taken a challenging situation and completely flipped it up to challenge herself in every single aspect of her life and build a new version of herself that is completely aligned to her purpose, that is connected to her heart, and that is orientated around service. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Alex Marostica. So firstly, welcome. This is the first Fierce Compassion conversation that happens in this podcast. And Alex Marostica is my guest. She's a good friend of mine. And the reason why I've chosen Alex in Fierce Compassion is because she is one of those sorts of people that I have in my life, or she's that person that I have in my life who has gone through a huge transformation in the last 5 years that I've witnessed. And I've become quite close to Alex over that period of time. And I hold her as a very close relationship in my life. And I think one of the reasons why I'm drawn, and I was drawn, and I am drawn to Alex, is that she has a huge amount of courage. She has a beautiful, kind spirit, and she has taken on fear like no one I've ever witnessed in my life before. And in watching her going through this amazing transformation that I've watched over the past 5 years, I thought in this time of COVID-19, of all of this uncertainty that's going on and all of this fear, I'm going to lean on one of my experts. So I'm going to lean on somebody who in my circle epitomizes huge amounts of courage in the way that they've dealt with their own fears, perceived limitations, stretching to their growth and their potential. So just to give you a quick insight around who Alex is. Alex is has built her way up through an amazing organization called the 12 Apostles Hotel and Spa. She spent 13 years climbing the ladder and became the HR manager and the top dog there in the HR space. And then she went through this incredible transformation. She has got a number of brands, which I'll ask her to speak into. But what really is astounding is that she's had the courage to actually pursue this life of fullness and as I see it, chase her fears, and on the other side of her fears, just reach this incredible success in building an online business, supporting people in achieving their dreams and their ultimate vision for themselves that they might not have given themselves permission to actually have reached for. And Alex has done this in her life, and now she supports other people. So thanks, Alex, for joining me on this. I've got a couple of questions for you, but thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to, firstly, the privilege of being the first on your podcast. And yes, and the blessing it is to be able to share like this on this platform with you and with the amazing people that are obviously watching. So thank you for this opportunity.
Wonderful. So let me kick straight into it and ask you the first question, because so I met Alex at a number of times, but the significant time was at my second Africa burn, which is an amazing experience that happens out in the desert. It's modeled on Burning Man. It's very creative. It's whatever you make it out to be. It can be a party or it can be a spiritual breakthrough. But I witnessed this flowering of Alex. And Alex, won't you just walk me through where you were in your life at that moment? What was going on for you? What was going on for you?
Yes. Well, it's actually 5 years ago right now, because the burn would have been on right now.
Yeah.
So that was 5 years ago, and I had just gotten divorced. I had gotten out of a 15-year marriage, and I was devastated. I was broken. I was in pieces. And a little later on, I'll tell you a little bit about how that was the biggest blessing. But I was in that space still where I was trying to figure out, and I was in that healing space of trying to just put all the pieces back together. I like to refer to it as like a bit of a puzzle. I had done quite a bit of work over the previous 8 months on sort of turning all the puzzle pieces so that they were right way up. And Africa Burns sort of was that last little bit that helped me slot the pieces in place to create a picture. And I came into there. I think you would probably remember I was quiet, withdrawn, shy, so scared. I didn't know what to expect. I was literally just trusting one of my best friends who said to me, Alex, I really think you should come to the burn. And I was like, okay. The burn just gave the space for all the stuff that I knew I needed to do, but was too scared to do. It gave me that space to safely sort of step out and play. And I think play has sort of been a bit of a theme for me around dealing with fear and having courage, was just giving myself permission that there are spaces where you can play a bit and step out of your comfort zone, especially when you take it from the point of view of life is a bit of a playground. And, it's okay if once in a while you fall off the slides, or, the swing goes too high or whatever. It's okay. The playground is, but then, sometimes you get to go around the merry-go-round so fast that it's like the most exhilarating moment, but I only got it because I allowed myself to play. And that's what the burn taught me, and helped me to take a step even further than that into other spaces in my life.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest learnings that I've had, I think, is giving myself permission to get into the play space. And Africa Burn actually did that for me as well, especially that trip. But I think that, like, for me, what I'd love to kind of just get into a little bit is that you, like you mentioned, you've been through a divorce. You'd been in an organization, the same organization, for 13 years. You made huge changes within that period that I met you, before as well as afterwards. Like, what inside of you pushed you into that space? What was the catalyst for you that allowed you to make decisions that would shift your normal life?
So shortly after my divorce, the very first thing I did when I moved out of my home, and I knew it was the end. I'd spent 15 months, 18 months, desperately trying to save my marriage. And I was eventually accepted, because it took me a long time to accept it. I fought it hard. Accepted that it's over now and I need to move forward. I moved out of my home, moved into a new home. And the very first thing I did was I booked a ticket to New York. My sister lived in New York. I'd never been to New York. I had for years and years been saying I want to go to New York, and for various reasons, the trip never happened. And it was like almost my first act of defiance out of my marriage was like, I don't need anybody's permission for this. I don't need to, it's nobody else's schedule. It's only me. And my very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to New York, which was great. I had like almost a month of amazing trip there. But I came home from that and suddenly now I was home. This amazing trip was over. The whole process of moving out, all these things that were actually keeping my mind occupied were over. And suddenly I was home and the only thing that was left was me and my sorrow. And I started seeing myself withdrawing. I stayed home for long periods. I Netflixed for ridiculous amount of time. And one evening, I was about to, it was the end of an episode, and I was about to click to the next episode on whatever series I was binge watching. And I just stopped myself and went, Alex, is this your life? Like, I know you need to heal, but is this your life? And you know better. You know better. You've coached and counseled other people who've gone through devastating stuff. Why are you not taking your own medicine? Why are you not taking the advice you give other people? Which I suppose is typical for coaches, isn't it? We don't ever take our own medicine. And I thought, okay, I need to do this gently. And I recognized that I needed to be gentle with myself. I wasn't ready. And I gave myself 3 goals. Number 1 was to practice mindfulness. And I just focused on practicing every day. I did my meditations. I stood in front of the mirror and I needed to start changing how I spoke about myself. And I started every day saying self-love affirmations or telling myself something I loved about myself. And I really realized that I needed to grow my confidence, my self-esteem, because I was so broken. And then the third thing was because I wasn't socializing, my apartment was my safe haven. And I didn't feel quite ready yet to sort of reach out to people. But people were reaching out to me. So the agreement with myself was, you're not to say no to an invitation. It's okay if you're not ready yet to invite yet. But if someone invites you, you can't say no. That was the agreement. And as the universe has it, the very next day, I get an email from a friend who says, guys, we're going zip lining. Who's in? Now, I am petrified of heights. I don't do things like zip lining. That is enough for me. But I had an agreement with myself, and that was the moment of truth. That was like, are you going to hold your end of the agreement or not? So I emailed back and I said, I'm in. It was 4 months away. It seemed like, forever. But the 4 months suddenly arrived, and it was the 29th of December, 2014. So just before New Year's. And we went ziplining. It was scary, but at the same time, it was the most exhilarating thing I'd ever done in my life. I remember leaving the last zip line. There were 11 of them. And I was on such a high. And in that moment, I realized that everything you want, Jack Canfield has this saying, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And that's exactly, that day was the proof to me. It was like, magic. Everything really is on the other side of fear. So I had my whole life been living sort of in the middle. I didn't do the extremes, and I played it safe. I did it where I could easily manage the risk, and everything was well thought and mitigated, etc. And that day I realized that while it is good to look at risk, there is such a thing as being overly risk averse. And the opportunities for real joy, and let's say the word ecstasy is only when we can move further than those boundaries.
Sure.
And that was that lesson that day. So I was about to go into New Year's, at 2 days later was New Year's, and I said, okay, fine. My New Year's resolution was that 2015 would be the year of facing fears. And I was not allowed to let fear be my obstacle. That doesn't mean I don't use reason. But if it's not reasonable, if there's no reasonable reason to say no, then my fear can't be the reason to say no. Then I need to work with it. So the year really taught me how to face fear. And I decided then also to take on the spirit animal of the phoenix as my symbol for the year. And it was a year where, just including that Africa Burn event and multitude of other things, that I just stepped out of my comfort zone. And I was really just preparing myself to eventually redefine a lot of my life. And I decided then that the phoenix was my spirit animal for good, not just for 2050. And yeah, that was the run up to before we landed up going to the burn. And the interesting thing was, at the burn, one of the scariest things for me about the burn was that we had decided as a group that we were going to have some theme evenings. And I remember beforehand, when we were at one of our preparatory dinners, we were all sitting talking about what all the things, one of our friends was like, oh, we should do Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And remember, everything inside me was saying, like, what? Why would one want to do that? Like, why expose yourself that way? All I think, but obviously I couldn't say it because everybody around the table was so happy and everybody voted in favor of it. I was like, man, out of all the themes that can be picked for us to be dressing up something so outrageous and flamboyant as Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And I really fought against it for a while within me. And we were all on this WhatsApp group, and everybody's posting their photos of all the things that we're buying and making and doing, etc. And I was really feeling a lot of anxiety about this, And about 10 days before or whenever, I just suddenly realized that, Alex, there's no getting out of this. You've agreed to this. So just either give your all or don't show up at all. And then you may as well not go. And so I said to start making my costume, and I decided that the phoenix was my costume, and I built this phoenix costume. And I turned out to have a little bit of a aptitude for dressmaking and costume making. I was very proud.
I will post that picture somewhere because it's absolutely awesome, and people understand the value of what you're saying right now when they see that pic.
Yeah. So, and I remember that day when I put the costume on. The first few minutes, there was like this real sense of, this is terrible. But the moment I stepped out and people saw it, and the acceptance, the wow, the awe, I immediately was realized, oh my word, Alex, look, you're like adding value beyond your own life to others as well. And that's part of what the burning is about. And it's, yes, and that was another moment of where I stepped out of my comfort zone and I got so much more in return. Like, when we face our fears, the universe gives us back tenfold. Every time.
Sorry, no, carry on.
Yes.
No, because there's so much in what you said, Alex, because let me just start where you started in that around finishing the series and then saying good affirmations around yourself. So Fierce Compassion is my kind of sub-brand, as it were, and it's my absolute passion and the thing that I'm positioning, that like, if you want to care for yourself mentally and emotionally, spiritually, taking like starting to love yourself and doing the things that show that you care for yourself really start to affect your health and physical well-being. So what I found amazing when you started that was around that affirmation, was having some level of compassion to yourself and going, okay, I need to change my image. I need to change how I see myself or how I view myself, which I think is unbelievably powerful. And then where you went was, you mentioned Jack Canfield and around that fear quote that set up your 2015, as well as the Phoenix and how powerful that was. And for me, there's a couple of pillars that I speak into. The one is following your intuition. So it sounds like you really kind of you took action at first, and then you followed this sequence of what sounded like soul-filled or soul-felt direction in chasing the fear, in attaching to that Jack Canfield quote, and then honoring those things that sounded like Yes Man, that Jim Carrey movie that I absolutely adore, that he just said yes to everything. And I find it struck such a chord with me. And only now that you've mentioned it, I was like, oh wow, so that's that like I'm saying yes to life. Is what you're speaking into. And the other principles that I've really started to understand is finding purpose, which you epitomize for me. It's following your intuition, which you epitomize. It's deepening your spirituality, which I know you're speaking into in little bits within that, but there is definitely a connection to self, which is the way that I see spirituality more than other religious contexts. But what you've done and what you've kind of modeled for me in how you've changed your life from married in a job that you've been building towards for 13 years to now this blossoming of you. And I'll put that picture of the Phoenix on at Africa Burn, because it visually shows what you've spoken to in the conviction that I've felt and seen in you in the last 5 years, and you haven't let it go. Like, I've gone through these spurts of challenging my comfort zone, but you've just kind of just been, and it's no surprising that you've got Ignite Your Business is one of your brands, Rising Phoenix, Flying Phoenix. You've got Flying Phoenix. So can you just explain where you are at the moment, just so that people can understand also? So now you've challenged yourself on the fear side. You've taken a challenging side of what's happened to you in the life and the choices that you made, and you've shifted it to align with what I see. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to project myself onto you, but what I see as honoring your soul, honoring yourself, putting yourself first, those sorts of beautiful things. So won't you just tell everybody like where you are right now, business-wise, emotionally, mentally, Alex?
Perfect. Thank you. So I guess first and foremost, I am a happiness and wellness coach, and that's really what the Flying Phoenix is about. So it's where everything started for me. So I had to be inspired by that year of facing fear, and that's why I used the Flying Phoenix even as my business brand. 2016, I went to another Africa Burn, and that one was a big out of comfort zone, because I went completely on my own. And I had, and I'm going to digress slowly slightly, because I'd love to just give this as background to how I landed up where I am and why I'm here today. So I started 2016 feeling a little out of sorts. I just had this amazing year of facing fear. Learned so much about fear, how I deal with fear, how to get around it. But I felt a little lost. I came into 2016 knowing that I wanted to continue having these amazing experiences and opportunities. I knew that I had to change something in my life. I knew that I really wanted to work somehow online. I'd always known my natural progression would be to get into coaching, but I had no idea how to do it. And you invited or had just set out a weekend course sort of around setting up your year. And the course happened probably about 10 days to 2 weeks before the upcoming Africa Burn. And I'd been in a little bit of anxiety. I really wanted to go to the Burn again. I had this amazing experience the year before. And all my friends who were going to the Burn either were no longer going or had somehow been absorbed into some other project at the Burn, which I wasn't keen to be involved in. And I found myself completely on my own and upset. Because in my head, the idea of going to the Burn on my own seemed wrong. Like it's not the way the Burn is done. It's not me. I'm not a person who does these kind of things on my own. It's too scary. Anyway, so I went on your weekend course. One of the things that you had us do was a vision board, which is amazing for someone who's in the personal development space. Again, this is where we need to sometimes take our own medicine. I have had many people do vision boards. I have recommended doing vision boards to loads of my team members, etc. But do you think I had ever personally actually sat and done a vision board? No. And that was the gift that day, aside from many other things that happened. But there was this vision board. I did the vision board, and it was just travel, what amazing experiences, wanting to work online. Everything was just so clear for me on this vision board. And then that evening, after I had left your course, I had a chat with another friend of mine, and I was explaining to him, like, I'm feeling anxious about this Africa Burn thing. And as I'm talking to him, he didn't say a word to me. I was just unpacking and venting. And through that process, I came to the decision that I've got nothing to lose. May as well pack my car, go. If I hate it, I can pack my car again and come home. And I went to the Burn. And, that vision board was like the catalyst. It manifested what I needed, because I landed up 10 days later at the Burn. Even how I picked my camping spot was somehow this like universe thing that told me this is where you need to camp. And I landed up camping next to people who were full-time travelers, only too happy to share their knowledge on how to become full-time travelers. Yes. And I also met a woman who was a career coach who gave me an hour of her time sort of coaching me through stuff. So between that and then meeting these other people, one of which today is my business partner. And so everything like there's such serendipity in the way things just worked together well. And I left that Burn with a plan. I realized that there is only one way to move forward. There's only one way to get what I want, and that is to start putting the things in place so that I can eventually quit my job. And this was a job I loved. I'd been in the position for 9 years, in the company for 13 years. I loved the company. I loved the brand. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the work I did. I was really one of those people that when I woke up in the morning, I never ever went, oh, am I going to work today? I never did that. But I did reach a ceiling, and I'd reached a ceiling already a few years before, and I didn't know what my next step was. There wasn't one in the company. I also knew that my next step wasn't even in the industry, never mind the company. So just changing workspace wasn't going to help. And I knew that my next step needed to be working for myself, but that was so scary. But I left that Burn going, like, I can do that. I can start a business for myself, and I can do it in a way that will allow me to travel. And like a week later, I started my blog. And 18 months later, I'd quit my job and I went off to travel full time. And when I quit my job, the blog that I started was the Flying Phoenix. And the Flying Phoenix is all about helping people find happiness. And it's very much in line. I speak to people who were me 5 years ago, have some kind of massive adversity. They've hit rock bottom. And how do you rebuild from there? And how do you turn that adversity into something powerful and amazing and the catalyst to give you your best life? And it really is that adversity is the Phoenix fire. And The fire, yes, it's going to kill you, but sometimes we do need to die first.
Beautifully said.
But in that death is where rebirth is, and that's what that side of the business is. But the person that I'd met at the Burn, which is Gareth Pickering, he'd helped me to a large degree, coached me a lot in terms of starting my business. He also had his own online business. And the natural result from that was that at one point we realized, you know what, there's many, many coaches, healers, practitioners, people in that personal development space who, that the tech side is not their forte. Usually people are either great at task-focused things like tech, or they people-focused like the coaching side. So we were fortunate, both Gareth and I are people that can kind of do both. I'm good at the people side. My job has always since I left school, always been people orientated. I could never work in any other space, but I actually have a good aptitude for the technical side of the work. And so I was lucky, but many, many people in that coaching space don't have that. They are great at the people side, but you start talking to them, the geek talk, and their eyes roll over and they're thinking, this is Greek. And so we realized that there was a gap to actually support other coaches, practitioners, healers, etc., to be able to shift their work into the online space and particularly into the e-learning space. And that's where the second business, Ignite Your Business, came out of, is supporting people like me, but who maybe don't have the love for tech that I do.
So. And just as a incidental, I just launched my first online course through actually Alex's platform, which is called Moyo, the Heart Center. And so, Alex, you've gone from a safe place to relishing what it sounds like is the not necessarily uncertainty, but what sounds like, in how you've said it, adventure in life and looking at things differently and trying new things and being outside of your comfort zone. And I think it's very powerful and very inspiring, especially in the times that we're in right now where things are really, really challenging. And I've found that in the last 2 or 3 weeks that I really struggled with conspiracy theories and this possible thing happening and this possible thing and Cyril Ramaphosa doing the wrong thing and Trump being a funny guy in the US. And I'm, just in case my mom watches this, I'm going to keep that language to a minimum. But the people are in a very uncertain space right now. And this is obviously why I wanted to have this conversation with you. You've gone from being safe to being very successful in stretching yourself. And you've become somebody who I've looked at and have gone, wow, I think she knows what she's doing, to a point of where, can you please teach me on how to do this in the tech space and in the online space? And you are my go-to person for this. So you've come such a far way in 5 years. If you could give advice to people who are struggling with the change that is becoming the instability norm that is today, what would you give advice? What would your advice be to them? How would you advise people to manage themselves emotionally and mentally and to start moving forward? If that's the right thing for them, your wisdom around that.
So I'm going to be a little bit more general, because I think that what's happening now, and a lot of it, is so fear-driven. And really, I think how we approach this is no different to how we would really approach anything that is extremely fearful for us. And I think, for me, the starting point is always that fear and love are on opposing sides. Mm-hmm. The more love there is, the less space there is for fear. And the more fear there is, the less space there's for love. And this is why we often see situations, particularly when we start looking at as in terms of like populations of people, that and why we see that the powers that be like to instill fear is that the moment that we are operating from a space of fear, we become self-centered. We become self-preservative. It's all about me and looking after me. And we have difficulty in looking at the bigger picture and community as a whole. When we operate from a place of love, we can then trust the community more and trust that when we work for community, I will be looked after as well.
Awesome.
Now, in this virus, this is such a brilliant example because the reality is the solution to overcoming this virus is community. So if we look at our masks, for example, we don't wear our mask for ourselves. You wear your mask to protect others. My mask protects you, you protect me. So in order to, so the key to overcoming this virus is love, my love for others. But we've got media and governments and whoever who are doing the opposite. They're instilling the sense of fear in us and panic. And that's where you see things like, who are they to force me to wear a mask? How dare they take my rights away? And it becomes all focused on me, 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 me. And it's when we focus on that and start kicking back to the solution that we can't all do it together. Okay. So the key really is to try to move ourselves into a space of love. The key to love, though, is self-love. So it's almost a contradiction. This is the one time where it's good to be selfish. I need to love myself first, because if I don't love myself, I cannot have the capacity to love others. So whatever fear it is you're facing, whether it is this virus, whether it is going ziplining, it is start off with building up your self-love, because then you start diminishing the space for fear to live. But not only that, the more I love myself, the more I trust myself. The more I trust my capacity to wing it and go with the flow should something go wrong. The more I trust my own ability to be the mitigation if my worst fear did come true. It rarely does, but you never know. It might, you know. And for me, stepping out of my comfort zone, my biggest accomplishments, which have come from facing fear, have always been in moments when I had high trust in myself. Mm. When I knew, you know what, I am stepping out of a plane now, but I'm trusting that I packed my parachute well.
Yeah.
Because, and that has to do with confidence and good esteem, and it all starts with self-love. So the biggest gift we give ourselves is focusing on the practices that help us to love ourselves.
Okay, awesome. I couldn't I couldn't have written a better script to actually line up with fierce compassion. So thanks, Alex. The one thing that one of the stats I know is that we have between 50,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day on average, if we were to keep track of it. And 95% of those thoughts, I'm told, and I've checked across the internet for these and the consistency, so these are fairly accurate, that 95% of the thought is either regret or ruminating around the past, or it's anxiety around what's to come. So, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, and I really appreciate your perspective, because it really lines up with what I believe as well. But what could somebody do, considering that there's this bombardment of 50 to 70,000 thoughts that are going to take them away from love? One thing that you mentioned to me at the beginning of this was that you had that self-talk with yourself. So you started with one thing, and the one thing that I've realized as well in my personal growth, in my stretch, in everything that's happened with me, is that I start with consistency, these tiny, tiny, tiny little steps. and I be consistent and gentle with myself over time, and then that subtly impacts, and then that massively impacts. And that is my experience, and I'm not putting on anybody else. But what do you think, based on what you've said around connecting with love and this bombardment of subconscious thinking, we can do on a daily basis that will at least start that process, that somebody can actually have, like, I can bite into this and then I know I'm on the road? So your wisdom around that, Alex?
Perfect. Thank you. So, yeah, and I agree with you. I think our default is very much to either be past focused, regret, or unpacking stuff over and over, or future focused. And yes, it's anxiety. The key is really finding ways to be able to stay in the present. And if we think about it, life only happens in the present. The past and the future don't exist ever, except for up here.
Yeah, sure.
So really, it's about staying in the present. And there's a few things that people can do to firstly stay in the present, and secondly to uplift their own sense of self-love. So when I was in that moment of really realizing that I can't continue the way I was and I needed to change things, and I made those 3 promises to myself. So the first 2 were really the key in that respect. The one was every single morning I stood in front of the mirror and I could not leave and walk out the door if I did not find something to compliment myself on.
That's beautiful.
And it had to be honest. And I had to say it aloud and look myself in the eyes. And at the beginning, it was hard. I had so many things that I was critical about, and we are all super critical with ourselves. There's this beautiful advert that was done by Dove a few years back where they had women journal their personal thoughts. Yeah. And then they had the stuff read back to them, or they overheard a scenario where this stuff was being read back. And these women got really upset and said, how can you speak to another human being that way? And they said, but these are your thoughts, and this is how you speak to yourself every day. We speak to ourselves in ways that we wouldn't dare say to another human being. We would never use that kind of language, that way of saying things, that rudeness, but we do it with ourselves. So it was really about trying to reprogram the way I spoke to myself. So each day, I would get ready for work, dressed to the nines and ready for work, and look at myself in the mirror and would say, and first it was like stuff which for me, particularly at that time, but it's my ongoing thing that colors my self-esteem is I have, like many women, issues with my physical appearance, and I couldn't compliment myself on my physical appearance at the beginning. Everything was more to do with like, you're so productive, you're great at your work, look how good you are with people. But eventually it started moving into things like, you've got great feet, which was, for me, it was a big win. That but the key was it had to be honest. I wasn't allowed to just like say things that I can get out the door. So that was the one key, every single day. And then the second thing was this great TED talk, and I know that you love this talk as well. It's by Sean Aker, and it's on the happiness advantage. And I remember seeing it. It was just, for me, such a game changer seeing it. And those five things that he suggested, that was part of my mindfulness practice. I meditated every day. I practiced gratitude every day. I looked for opportunities to do conscious acts of kindness. He refers to them as random acts of kindness, but I don't like the word random. Yeah. Random leaves too much to fate. So I say conscious acts of kindness. Journal every day. I journal, and I made sure I moved every day somehow. So those were the 5 things. So they were just 5 things I promised myself to do every day. They don't take long. It's not a massive time investment, and they kept me more present in the moment, and they started changing my thoughts towards positive thoughts. Gratitude is probably the single biggest thing that can reprogram your mind towards positivity. Those conscious acts of kindness, that feeling that you get when you do something for someone else, particularly someone who you get no benefit from in return, you cannot replicate that feeling anywhere else in your life. That buzz.
There's actually
So
some
those
amazing science behind that in positive psychology, actually, that your hormone system actually changes for months as opposed to momentarily because of that. So thank you for that. That's incredibly powerful.
And the other thing I just want to add to that, which is you have to manage the information coming in. And it's becoming harder and harder for us because we are so dependent on technology as our means for getting information. And we are beholden to these algorithms that are particularly that social media is built around. And the algorithms are built to be able to maintain your attention. So we have to be careful. If you show that you are intrigued by something that might be negative, and let's use an example of something that is maybe harmless but is negative. Like you get these fail videos where people are skateboarding and they fail. So I don't watch those because, as funny as they might be, it is a negative video. You are basically telling the social media things. I like watching things where people fail, where people fall, where they hurt themselves, where they get.
Never thought of it that way.
The algorithm remembers that and sends more to you. And it's not only so you can program that algorithm to send you only positive stuff by only clicking on positive stuff. When they see you only click, so my Facebook feed has a lot of tech stuff because that's what I show interest in.
Sure.
I've got a lot of spirituality and mindfulness stuff because that's what I show interest in.
Yeah.
But I do have a small addiction, which I'm going to admit now on a public platform. And I can't get rid of it because I have clicked too often. I like cat videos that do not add value to my life. And
I think they do.
Yes, they can. But, after you've watched 4 or 5 in one sitting, it's probably not good anymore. But it is about trying to manage. And again, there's nothing wrong with spending some time on Facebook. There's nothing wrong with binging a series on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's about managing it and not having that manage you. Yeah. Because the moment they manage you, then they manage your thoughts. And you then lose control of keeping those thoughts in a space of love.
That is very powerful, Alex.
So we've got this added thing to contend with that maybe 15, 20 years ago people didn't need to contend with. If they just did the self-love thing and the mindfulness thing, that would have been enough. But we have the additional thing. We need to watch what are we filling our heads with? What is the content we are consuming? Very
powerful, because also a lot of the work that I've done and I've experienced, and it's my story as a spontaneous remission cancer survivor, is that your thoughts then affect your emotions, and when your emotions get stimulated, that's where different hormones get produced, and you can either have stress hormones or you can have joy hormones, and it's really up to whatever we put in our minds, essentially, what hormones we then produce. So, and I know this is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but and it was for me at a point as well, is that I was responsible for my cancer. I made every single decision that allowed for that to happen, and be it that from my mental, from exposure to the sun because it was skin, nutritional density of the food, to the care that I took with myself. I find what you said there to be encompassing and essentially a summary of the whole ball game when it comes to fierce compassion, and that is to be very gentle with ourselves, and being gentle by being. I remember sitting with my dermatologist about 3 years after I was clear of cancer, and I said to her, and I said, her name is Dagmar Whittaker, Dr. Whittaker, amazing woman. And I said to her, I don't want this ever to happen again. What do I do? And very progressive, very amazing, like very, very thoughtful and open-minded human being. And she said to me, Brett, watch what you put in here, here, and here, and you'll be fine. And it was probably the most profound statement, because that came from an allopathic doctor. And it was just surprising for me, and it opened a complete world that was very different to the previous world that I had before cancer, because I started to becoming really cognizant of what I was digesting, what I was taking in, what media I was. So I feel your wisdom on this is spot on, and I love that it comes from somebody who I know has got an amazing tech ability. So you understand algorithms, and when you said that, I was actually just like, "Yo, okay." I must actually modify my behavior as well, because I do click on stuff that's habitual as opposed to, what do I want from this? What is this going to add value to me, or is it not?
Yeah.
So yeah, Alex, thank you so much. It's been invaluable speaking to you. I like, you have been that person for me that has taken fear on, and I so admire the transformation that's happened in you. You're a completely different human being now. I mean, you are this magnificent phoenix. I see you as a phoenix, and I always have. You've got the tattoo, you've got the dress. It's your spirit animal, and it just epitomizes who you are. And thank you so much for taking the time and the wisdom that you've given for me and for others. And I just really like to thank you for sharing, because I think it's so important that people who are inspirational are worth focusing on now. And again, it's down to, who do we follow? Who do we watch? These people lifting us, or are they making us more fearful? And you certainly open my heart when I connect with you. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brett. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I have no doubt that this is the first of many,
thanks. It's the first one.
Episodes. And also, and just right back at you, I just want to say that what you do is inspiring. I love how you've taken your biggest adversity and changed that into something that is meaningful and adds value and makes impact for others. And you did make mention that we've worked a little bit together now recently as you've launched your course, and me seeing like people on your course and the feedback, etc. It's just been amazing, but it was no surprise. And and yes, it's just such an honor to not only be here to chat with you, but just to know you and see how you are. And then also, just one thing related to our fear thing is that you got to where you are because you faced your own fears as well. And at the end of the day, you're also proof that it's through courage that we make the life and the impact that we are meant to make. We cannot do it any other way. And so thank you for being that example.
Pleasure. And I'm just like, there's a beautiful marketing segment of what you just said there. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to cut that and put that on. That's amazing. Because it's the epitome of what we are, it's and what we're speaking about here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.